geez. Apparently, I had multiple browser windows open. Not just, Jacob and I were talking about it before the show, and I was like, yeah, I got to make sure I mute this thing. I forgot to mute it last time, yada, yada, yada. So, well, I didn't have just one browser open, apparently, so I missed another browser that was playing the audio from the show tonight, so it just looped right back. Even though I tried to get it, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I missed the other one. Anyway, this is episode number 67 of UnSpun. I'm here with Jacob Duellman again. We're here to talk about the new kids on the block, sketches of Fabian Infiltration. Jacob's been doing a lot more research following the Gollancz lead after the Thomas Harrison lead, and which has gone right into the Fabians and is connected to all things Huxley and gone everywhere else. I've been really surprised to see all of the connections starting to pan out. Also, everyone, support the show, gnosticmedia.com. You can donate up at the top of the site there. Joe's out today. I'm hoping that he'll want to come back next week. We've got a lot of important research to share and go over. He missed last week, but anyway, we'll just keep pushing forward. Jacob, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me back 3 times. That's a hat trick, I believe. It's pretty rare to happen. I'm really excited. Thank you for having me back. It's an honor.
It's not necessarily. I mean, you think what Hans has been on like 30 times, and Steve has been on like 11 or 12 times or so, and so it's when there's continuing research to go through, it makes sense to try to get through it, and I think this and where it's heading lends a lot of understanding to what we're dealing with, and the realization that a lot of these people are connected into the Fabian Society, and then seeing it all branch out from there. Just in my database, I'm going to share mine, and you've actually gotten a database going yourself since you were on the show last time. So in the last couple of weeks, you've really built out yours, but here's the Fabians here in the database, and we can see their logo is the wolf in sheep's clothing. But we've got H.G. Wells, we've got Aldous Huxley, Annie Besant, Bertrand Russell, Beatrice Webb, David Rockefeller, John Dewey, John Maynard Keynes, Harold Lasky, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, former Prime Minister of England, is in there. Sir Keith Murdoch, here's Victor Gollancz, etc. Sidney Webb, Beatrice Webb, all these people tie into there. And then, for instance, let's just click on Aldous Huxley and look at where things spread out from Huxley. And we go into the Esalen Institute, into the CIA's MKUltra program, and into all of this mind control stuff that we've been exposing, into the Macy conferences. Everything goes... branches out from him, and we can pick Sir Victor Gollancz, and we see the same thing happening, and through his publishing house, etc. But Jacob, you've actually found far more on Victor and all things related to that angle. So anyway, I'll hand it over to you and let you start to take us through it. Do you want to pull up your brain database?
Sure. Should I just do the share screen method here?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, everybody seeing that?
Yep.
Okay, so what we are looking at right now is a group that Joshua Glenn over at the Boston Globe stated as the new kids. He decided to recreate the generations and kind of go through and see how different influential literary and intellectual and academics influence society over the years. What I kind of did was take in his approach and just kind of put every influential person beyond just the literary and the academic. So I want political, editors, politicians, they're all going to be added into this because I need to find a way of organizing how this all progressed through time. This whole approach that I'm doing on the brain database is very cyclical. So we started off with Tom Harrison, and then from Tom Harrison, we found the Left Book Club. and Mr. Sir Victor Gollancz. So I would try to find an angle, a little branch, and just kind of go and shoot off onto that and see as much as I can find, and then come back to Victor and Thomas, and then mass observation, and then go back out, and then come back in. So it's kind of like a very spiral kind of a method, I suppose.
Now, yeah, and an interesting one I see, well, there are a lot of interesting ones, but one that really stands out there is Dorothy Sayers. Of course, the Lost Tools of Learning comes from her, and a lot of the trivium stuff, but then we see, and we had figured out that a lot of them were tied in. Who's the guy that wrote How to Read a Book? He had done
Mortimer Adler.
Yeah, and he was tied into all of these groups as well, and then we see Dorothy Sayers is tied in right there as well. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Dorothy Sayers, she's very interesting because of a lot of her, not a lot, but some of her works were published by Victor Gollancz Ltd., and I believe he might have edited some of her stuff as well, but I still need to flesh some of that out. One of the books that she wrote actually was, under his title, was Unpopular Opinions, and that kind of goes into a lot of her, I haven't really studied it far enough to really make a lot out of it, but she wrote this piece called The Human Not Quite Human, and that was about, basically, am I pulling this up properly here? Are we seeing this?
It's showing.
It's not coming up, though. Whatever. All right, so basically, it's a lot of her treatises that are unpopular opinions that people might find untasteful or improper for society to come out, things that might maybe... It's really tough to kind of approach this because it's so big. Feminism is such a massive part of this, and it's really hard to approach it in a way where you don't just offend people right off the bat, because it's not like I'm anti-woman or anything like that. But the women's suffrage movement was very important, and Dorothy Sayers was a prominent figure, and it seems like she was kind of an individual who Victor could kind of latch onto to kind of promote his publishing house in such a manner that gives him some prestige. Let me see.
And of course, we've well revealed since then that the entire idea behind that was really to break up the backbone of the family and the home, which was the mom or the mother. Mm-hmm. And so then that way they could get the moms out of the homes and out of the community into the factories, and then to make it sound like freedom, they then give them the right to vote, which of course there's no taxation without representation. So as soon as they gave them the right to vote, it was the trick was they were actually taxing them. So they were able to not only, they were able to suddenly tax half of the population that they previously couldn't get at. And then they dressed this up as this women's liberation movement.
There's a term, it's called enfranchisement, and you want to become part of the franchise. And
right.
I see these terms kind of popping up, and it kind of reminds me of one of your former guests back on the show, Clint Richardson.
Yeah, I plan on having him on again soon. In fact, he and I have messaged several times in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'd actually be very curious to see how he might see this brain database and how these people kind of connect to the enfranchisement and the enslavement through legalism in the late 18 and early 1900s. So.
Right. All right. We'll take. Okay. Well, we still have the screen shared, so you should probably walk us through this.
Okay. So back to the new kids. Let me just type that in really quick because it kind of got scattered. So you see the names on here. These are all the kids that were born in this generation, and they're all incredibly influential in what happened in world politics internationally. We have Adolf Hitler, who, Nazi, World War II, Germany. Alan Dulles in the CIA, Arnold Joseph Toynbee. I believe this is the one that authored History of Civilization. Was that what it was called? I believe. Oh, might as well click on to see. Yep.
I'd have to. Yeah.
And what's interesting about this one is that Mr. David Churchill Somerville wrote the abridgment, and that David Churchill Somerville launched Victor Gollancz's publishing career when they introduced the political education and civics into the public school system. So, I mean, it's kind of an incestuous little web right here that just keeps kind of turning around.
Yeah, it's just like the MKUltra groups, how you go one or two steps and you loop right back into the exact same people over and over.
And you find here the London School of Economics, and the London School of
Right.
Economics was founded by the Fabian Society, and then you see the Fabian Society, and like, wow, look at all these names. I mean,
Right, and of
we have
course,
Mahatma Gandhi.
London School of Economics had Gordon Wasson in it, and we loop right back into the psychedelic MK Ultra research.
And here's an interesting one right here. So I have Mahatma Gandhi. Am I sharing right now? I
Yes,
have
you
Mahatma
are.
Gandhi. Yeah, I have him highlighted right now. So if you click on his name, we find Jawaharlal Nehru, who founded the Indian independence movement, who is connected on Annie Besant and Victor Gollancz and a whole bunch of people.
Well, I'm going to share my database on screen really quickly. All right, so I have Gandhi as a theosophist and influenced by Thomas Allenson,
Really?
and but I have him as a theosophist, and then I need to do more research on him, but yeah, I think he was tight. It's like when I started researching the Dalai Lama, and he connects to the CIA, 50 Ways from Sunday, right?
Oh, yeah. Every
You're
way.
like, let me show, just to give the audience an example. I just, all of these are all the many dozens of citations that show that the Dalai Lama was getting funding from the CIA, and he's connected all over the place to the CIA. But the Tibetan movement. Oh, another interesting thing is we've been researching how they've been faking and creating ancient history. And I started looking into, let me just bring that up again, when the first Dalai Lama came about. And the first Dalai Lama was in the 14th century. So this stuff isn't even that old. It's it's essentially a new Tibetan Buddhism is essentially new. So, we have, and there were other leads that I've seen popping up that suggest that maybe Tibetan Buddhism was another invention of that time, like how they've, fake documents everywhere, like how Anatoly Fomenko shows in his work the new chronology. But if it's possible that they just faked all of that stuff, like Buddhism, the whole thing, Gandhi, he's a theosophist tied with Annie Besant and all of these people leading another false movement,
And those theosophists are interesting. When I was kind of digging into that, Annie Besant, I found this documentary, and I was like, man, this is pretty interesting. It goes into her life, and I look at the credits, and George Lucas was the executive producer, and Lucasfilm produced it.
Hey,
So
why
it's
don't
like,
you get rid of that so we can see each other while you're not going through that?
oh, sorry. There we go.
There you go.
I forgot to click on that. I see. Thing. Okay, so so I'm looking at this documentary about Annie Besant, and I see George Lucas as the executive producer, and I see that it's his production company that made the documentary. So I'm thinking that's interesting. So I look up the source for it, and that was from the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. That was a TV series, I believe, in the early '90s. When I was growing up as a kid, I loved that show. So I thought that was really interesting that this man has theosophical viewpoints and was willing to spread them and share them. So it kind of makes Star Wars turn into a completely different perspective when you kind of see how theosophy kind of plays into this new religion that they're promoting through.
Well, wait, and you won't be able to see this, but the audience will be able to see it. So let's go to Star Wars. Actually, let's just go to Joseph Campbell, who Joseph Campbell, who is a key figure with George Lucas in creating Star Wars. Joseph Campbell, he was a big Crowleyite. He was living in Woodstock at the Maverick when Aleister Crowley was out on Esopus Island writing Do What Thou Wilt on the rocks. And then Joseph Campbell was at Stanford Research Institute, which has got MK Ultra all over it. And Joseph Campbell was the lead scholar behind the Changing Images of Man project, which again goes into MK Ultra and all of this, stuff from every angle. All of this this new religion that they're creating and selling us. This is all created out of Joseph Campbell. And then Joseph Campbell is also who created The Hero's Journey, which Steve Outram and I exposed in the ongoing series on Burning Man, and I'm still editing part 6 on that. But so it goes into all of these different directions, and then we see George Lucas, and and I need to do much more research just on George Lucas, but Anton LaVey was connected in with Star Wars, but here, hold on a second. George Lucas was he basically took over a huge chunk of the Presidio military base up in San Francisco.
I just mapped that myself too. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, in fact, last September I went by the building that he rented out. We were up there checking out some of the claims about the Presidio and the library there that some claim has a basement. Yeah, there's no basement there. There's no place to burn documents there, as other hosts have falsely claimed that they used to do operations for Aquino and others there. But so George Lucas was also at Altamont, and which was the Rolling Stones concert, of course, Rolling Stones, funded by London School of Economics, right?
A Fabian Society front.
Right, and then Timothy Leary's there. I think wasn't Vito Palakis there? Yeah, Vito Palakis was there putting on his whole dance show and everything. But then we have the Meredith Hunter murder going on there, and then who is filming it? None other than George Lucas. So, and it's, interesting. Lucas, I mean, you could go into a whole thing just on the last name there.
Yeah, Mr. Lucius.
Yeah.
The Light.
Luke Light, the Lucius Skywalker. Lucifer Skywalker. Oh, sorry.
It's like everything once you kind of scrape away the surface and you kind of dig down under the nitty gritty, everything starts to make a lot more sense. I mean,
yeah, and so here you're pulling all of these connections together by just on this tangent you've gone on from Brigadier General Thomas Harrison. So this is. And it's like, just a little fragment that I think Joe picked up on it, asked for some help to find one poem, and he says, oh, I think I can prove all of this from this guy. And then you went in to find that and then hit a big jackpot. So good job on that, man.
Yeah, thanks. I'm actually really looking forward to Joe's piece on the poem as well. So as soon as he releases that, hopefully we get that shared, and I can't wait to read it. I really can't.
Indeed. All right, so what's next? What did you find next? I know. So we covered Dorothy Sayers. Who else didn't we cover yet? There was a few others.
Well, there's something that was kind of curious. I got the Victor Gollancz biography, and if you kind of look at this picture, it's kind of hard with the glare.
Yeah, you got there.
He's kind of covering up that eye there, isn't he? A little bit there, he's only showing one eye.
A little bit.
Yeah,
in the shadow.
He's got that eye in the shadow right here, so it reminds me of a lot of different photographs from influential people who like to cover up one eye.
Yeah.
That's
all right.
Gollancz publication.
So now, what about these other players on the New Kids? And it's kind of funny. I mean, so then they roll out the New Kids on the Block. I wonder if that's even a pun. The Fabians playing another joke. Here's another. We're just going to roll out the New Kids on the Block, right? But you look back, and the old kids on the block were this whole group of new military CIA intelligence powerhouses.
Yeah, and these new kids in the back in the day were basically the children of elites, but not necessarily always the case. We could probably go to D.H. Lawrence. That one was kind of interesting because of the way that kind of the role he played in the obscenity trials and.
Sure. Well, and D.H. Lawrence was lovers with Aldous Huxley. Why don't you share screen on that again?
Sure. Let me just get the zoom back up. I'm just looking squarely at my brain database. Okay, so I have D.H. Lawrence pulled up right now. I actually have him already connected to Aldous Huxley and Mr. Percy Stevenson, who is his editor for Lady Chatterley's Lover, which was uncensored. Went to University College Nottingham. D.H. Lawrence is part of the Theosophical Society. It's just interesting that Aldous Huxley kind of connects into this and is one of the key players in promoting a lot of his friends in the literary arts, putting them forward. And D.H. Lawrence was pivotal in changing the way publications went out to the masses. First Lady Chatterley's Lover was printed privately. It was only given to people privately, kind of underground. So it's kind of like the dirties, the naughty stuff. I've never read the book. I don't know if I should read the book, but I probably should for the studying purposes of it. This is influential in changing the way that society received literature. Now it's okay to have much more Victorianly conceived obscene images be presented to the public.
Well, it's kind of like maybe like a different phase of Allen Ginsberg, right? A different flavor of Ginsberg or pre-Ginsberg almost, right?
Mm-hmm. There's definitely tones of that within his work. Percy Stevenson, Aldous Huxley, he goes back over to Australia, and being tied to Aldous Huxley, I'm kind of curious if maybe he's connected to some of his other family and friends, because he was pivotal in kind of doing the Australia First movement, the Ginger Wollerbach movement, Foundations of Culture in Australia. He created The Publicist. He is influenced by Vladimir Lenin. He's a Rhodes Scholar, went to Queen's College, Oxford. He's very influenced by Friedrich Nietzsche and the Communist Party of Australia. I mean, it's just so weird. You look at the Communist Party of Australia and you're like, okay, where did they come from? Oh, Adela Pankhurst. Well, Adela Pankhurst was raised in a Fabian family by Emmeline Pankhurst and Richard Pankhurst, who were communists. It just keeps going all the way back to the Fabian Society, and they also were, Annie Besant was influential in them. So, there's just this weird triangle or circle that just keeps going around, and it's kind of confusing at times, but it's also not. Everyone's connected.
Well, when you get into these feedback loops,
that's what it is.
It's like, well, hey, that's really when you begin. You see Jiddu Krishnamurti there. He was a close pal of Aldous Huxley, and then you loop right back into the Fabians, and you go to another one, and it just keeps looping back, and then you begin to understand the control structure. But here's another thing that the audience needs to understand. Why don't you turn off the share screen for a second? Something that the audience, it might help them to understand that also what we're looking at is intelligent cells and networks. So if you're thinking of like a chain link fence or like a Bucky dome or a Bucky ball, and how each of these nodes connects with all of these other nodes. Well, this is how, or even like the World Wide Web is constructed, through all of these different networks, and each computer being a node on the network and passing information along. This is how the intelligence infrastructure is set up. And so when you have, that understanding, when you have the understanding of, of Buckminster Fuller's geodesic domes and these things, then you can begin to see how, these networks are built. And then not only that, not only can they be, lateral, they can be layered. So, it can go three-dimensionally downward in and have cells within cells as well. So,
yeah, I think Jason Horsley mentioned, there could be there's competing interests. It's not just one interest. There could be multiple ones. I think he was talking about that with the dance halls. It's not just to get people to do the Lambeth Walk. It's also to sell drugs, to create promiscuity,
everybody's got their hands in the pot, and hey, let's make dance halls,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like
I get to sell the drugs, you get to sell the porn, you get to sell the the hotel rooms down the street from the dance hall, you sell the alcohol, you sell the electricity, you sell the sound equipment, yada yada yada, and everybody's got their hand in the pot.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up nodes too, because that kind of pops something in my head to kind of keep that line going. Regarding the Sir Victor Gollancz and the New Statesman, that is definitely a node. I should probably share screens here really quick, just maybe.
Sure, go ahead.
I have. Let's get this here. Okay, so Sir Victor Gollancz, as you can see, is incredibly influential. Sorry, my screen can't be much larger than this to show it. But he has a shill working for him by the name of Mr. Gerald Gould, who was his chief.
Gould.
Yeah, I know, right? He's also a Fabian, by the way. Went to
Yeah.
Naval College. He was also part of Masterman Wellington House propaganda department. So he was a propagandist during World War One. So he's very skilled in public relations. Now he's also working for Victor Gollancz as chief manuscript writer, because he thought that if he could get somebody to review his books in a favorable position, it would help him gain stature. So his whole point was to find people who will shill for him, and Gerald Gould is a shill.
So what you're talking about is like, this thing I exposed with Gordon Wasson and Charles McLean Andrews and Alan Nevins, creating the circle jerk, citing each other's bullshit work to make it sound legit, which eventually expanded out into the Spies in Academic Clothing article, which showed how these cells work. But
and this is a very big sell. Gerald Gould is not only influenced by Lansbury or by Victor Gollancz, he is also part of the Lansbury's Lambs,
right,
part of the Daily Herald. And
what I want to do, Jake, really quickly is I want to read a quote by Bill Clinton's professor Carol Quigley.
You got it.
So that people can understand how these intelligence cells work as far as so-called academic study or what have you. Hold on just a second. My eyes are getting old as I get old. So, all right, the interaction of these various branches on one another under the pretense that each branch was an autonomous power, the influence of each branch was increased through a process of mutual reinforcement. The unanimity among the various branches was believed by the outside world to be the result of the influence of a single truth, while in reality it was the result of the existence of a single group, i.e., Fabians, i.e., Gollancz, i.e., Wasson and all these intelligence cells, etc. So, thus, a statesman, a member of the group, announces a policy. By the same time, the Royal Institute of International Affairs publishes a study on the subject, and an Oxford Don, a Fellow of All Souls, and a member of the group also publishes a volume on the subject, probably through a publishing house like G. Bell & Sons or Faber and Faber, allied to the group. The statesman's policy is subjected to the critical analysis and final approval in a leader in the Times, while the two books are reviewed in a single review in the Times Literary Supplement. Remember, that's where they also slandered John Allegro, was in the Times Literary Supplement, and they created a whole cell against him there. Both the leader and the review are anonymous, but are written by the members of the group. And finally, at the same time, an anonymous article in the Roundtable strongly advocates the same policy. The cumulative effect of such tactics as this, even if each tactical move influences only a small number of important people, is bound to be great. They're even doing this stuff to each other up at the high levels,
Yeah, that is precious. That makes so much sense when you look at my brain database. Oh my God. I mean, connected to your research, it's like...
Yeah, well, and my when I was going through... it was just so obvious that the intelligence community had written all of the books on MKUltra, and I was going through reading them all, and I was like, okay, this says it. I'm laying out all the citations. I'm like, all right, I got it. And somebody, I forgot if I had stumbled across it years ago when I read Quigley's work, or if somebody had emailed it to me, and it was just like, boom, okay, I've got it, And then you start going through and you compare all their notes, and they each reveal a little truth, because they, have to stick to, like, I don't know, probably 66-33 since it's a cult, right? Yeah. 66% facts and 33% bullshit. And then, they sell this stuff out to the public, and they create the illusion of a single truth. But meanwhile, in fact, Martin Lee and John D. Marks and Hank Albarelli and Jay Stevens and all these guys, they're all working for the same team, publishing by a script. There's a blueprint. Hey, agent, You want to write a book about MK Ultra? Here, let me print you out the MK Ultra blueprint book. Oh, you want to write a book about economics? Here's the economics blueprint, for your book. And they just, pass this stuff out. So, each of these is based on a blueprint, and then how they. Well, let me ask you this, see if you know this one, because this is when it gets really funny. Who created the university system as it is today?
Oh my goodness. Who created the university system as it is today?
Okay.
I'm sure it's in my database, but I'm
Thomas Henry Huxley.
Yep, Big Daddy boy right
there. Right. So you've got Thomas Huxley creates this this university system, and then how do they keep all of this stuff in control, right? By the peer review system, right? So then anybody who figures it out, if they want to submit it, and then the peer review system keeps anything out, and then they maintain control of the whole system and what's accepted as academic truth. But but once you understand how these cells work, then these peer review systems also act as obvious cells, right?
Oh, that makes so much sense, and especially in regards to Britain, it makes it a lot easier to analyze it because they have this whole system of chivalry and prestige. And if you look at these top academics, at least that I'm finding, they're fellows of the Royal Society. Sure. They are knights, lots of knights. They're very important. Right. So they give all these orders of prestige.
Wasn't Arthur Stoll? Let's see. Let's find Arthur Stoll here. Arthur Stoll was he was Albert Hoffman's boss at Sandoz, and he's a member of the Royal Society of London. And then there's Julian Huxley and Thomas Huxley, like right there. But I suspect. Oh, and then Max Perutz, cousin or uncle of Leo Perutz, who wrote the early book on LSD 5 years before Albert Hoffman's discovery of LSD. His uncle or brother or whatever, Max Perutz, is a member of the Royal Society also, where Julian and Thomas Huxley are at, and then they're leaking out all of this information, but it's all connected, so we can see another cell there. But I suspect that it was Arthur Stoll who really invented LSD, probably around 1918, and then what they did was my cord is getting tangled around me. And then what they did was to cover up about 20 years worth of human experiments. They passed the invention of LSD over to Albert Hoffman in 1938.
Jeez. I'm like stunned.
But you get, so it's a repeated network, of these cells just constantly doing this, But they're all phony. So then you go over to Anatoly Fomenko's research on the new chronology, and you see, oh wait, okay, so the British Royal Society was doing this, and then the Catholic Church was doing this. Oh, and then the Russian Academy of Sciences figures it all out and tries to expose it all.
It's like
and then.
I was just saying there's a curious path that I'm kind of connected to on this as well. I think you're probably wanting to return this to it, so maybe I'll let you finish and then...
Oh, no, go ahead. You can,
So, because you're talking about just, using prestige of these institutions and publishing companies and, putting the statesmen at the fore and then spread the propaganda. Sir Victor Gollancz's uncle, I think it's Professor Sir Israel Gollancz, yeah, that's correct. I'm going to share my screen here. I think I have him pulled up. He has an interesting history. Just give me a moment here.
He was like one of the key guys behind the foundation of Israel, wasn't he?
I think that was his brother, Rabbi Professor Sir Hermann Gollancz. I'm still mapping this family out. I have some information that'll be coming in that should be very helpful and really giving us an idea of what this family is, at least in the past. Don't know what they're like now. So, but because they're not prominent, not in the fore. Rabbi Sir Hermann Gollancz started the Shovevi Zion movement, or at least he was integral in starting it. He's also the first rabbi to ever be knighted in England. And he's also, I think, the first Galatian Jew to be named a rabbi in England as well, which created a lot of controversy. But that's much more in crowd related towards the religion. I'm not really familiar with it, so I can't really go too far as far as giving details. But going back to Professor Sir Israel Gollancz, his brother, Professor Sir Israel Gollancz was very key in founding the British Academy. The British Academy used the, let me see if I can pull it up right here. I have to do it this way. Was key in using the British Mandate for Palestine to create the British School of Archaeology in Jerusalem. Now, what's interesting about the British School of Archaeology in Jerusalem was that I think they were the method of getting them in to research it, because this is all created by Jewish people, but the Jewish culture were not allowed to go and review the Dead Sea Scrolls. Am I getting that correct? You have more history.
Well, no, I mean, it was pretty much very tightly controlled by the Catholic and Jewish scholars, and then John Allegro came in and kind of loused everything up for him. You know, he started bringing a lot of attention. He started getting independent funding. He went to King Hussein and got money to fund his own expeditions and research and all of this stuff. And so they really did everything they could to push Allegro out. And then Allegro was also who wrote The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, saying that early Christianity was basically a drug mushroom cult. You know, and now we can look back and see how they're using all the drugs for all of this stuff now, and we can see that they played this out previously. But, there was John Strugnell. Allegro was basically the only one that wasn't, I think most of them were actually Catholic. I probably have that in my database.
I think you're correct. That kind of rings familiar to my head as well. I think Allegro was the only one that wasn't...
I think John Strugnell may have been another one.
I was watching that one video I shared with you. I can't remember.
I may not even have all of the scholars' names in here, but here's Allegro. And, so Allegro had written all of these books on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then he had written, 11, 13 books that progressed through all of his research, going up into The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, and then... his later books, The Chosen People, and Physician Heal Thyself, and a couple of others. But all of his books are shown down here. But I mean, they really made significant effort to clamp down on Allegro's research, unless we're looking at another double rep. But, it was Gordon Wasson, the so-called discoverer of magic mushrooms, that headed the attack against Allegro. And now, of course, we know that Wasson was working for the CIA the entire time, headed MKUltra Subproject 58. And then, I suspect that Allegro thought that academia was supposed to be about publishing your findings honestly, like you and I do, know, and then he... got hit by the wall of CIA and MI6 counterintelligence operations in Wasson and the Times Literary Supplement. And I even got the behind-the-scenes letters of what was going on with the Times, with Wasson, with Allegro. I mean, getting each of their letters and being able to see the whole thing unfold from the background,
Wow, that'd be really fascinating to read.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty fascinating stuff. I did publish a lot of it in my 2008 book, The Holy Mushroom, but I do recommend people that read that book, because that actually became the foundation for exposing that Wasson was CIA, which led to all of the later research that we've done over the last, since 2008. But if it wasn't for Wasson's ridiculous attacks on Allegro, we would have never found the corner to get the corner of the rug up to be able to start unraveling and unrolling the whole damn thing. So
that's a dirty rug.
Yeah, it's a dirty damn rug, and
it extends
far. Anyway. Yeah, it extended far. It's just like your research on Harrison, and it just goes on forever. And you all of a sudden one day you realize, oh crap, I'm looking at the CIA, or I'm looking at this intelligence organization, or whatever.
Yeah, speaking of Harrison, let me pull up my email really quick because I have a book on the way tomorrow. It should be in my mailbox tomorrow, hopefully. It's edited and created by Margaret Mead. It's called Primitive Heritage: An Anthropological Anthology, edited with an introduction by Margaret Mead and Nicholas Callas. Does the second name come familiar to you at all? Just curious.
Margaret Mead and whom?
Nicholas Callas, Callas. I haven't mapped him out yet. So
Callas. No, he's, obviously Mead was married to Bateson, who's key founder behind the CIA. But
well, there's some contents in this book, and I'm going to be naming these names right here you just mentioned. So this book was printed in London by Victor Gollancz Ltd. in 1954. I believe Victor Gollancz is still alive at this time. It kind of goes through anthropology and antiquity, Herodotus, Strabo, and Tacitus, the mythical past, Rousseau, Friedrich Engels, Nietzsche, Freud, and Reich, theoretical approaches, Crawley, that's Crawley, Merritt, Levi-Bruhl, Tyler, Lee, Trumbull, Hubert and Maus, Sapir and Benedict. Then we move on to the scene. This is where it gets interesting. The scene was compiled and the contents were provided for by Doty, Lawrence, Guide, Nadell, Gray, Thomas Harrison, Malinowski. And then from this, it proceeds to a series on children. And this was written by Stevenson, Roth, Roheim, Melville, Margaret Mead, Herskovitz, and Kidd. And we all know what Margaret Mead thinks about children in primitive cultures and what they do. And then we move on to puberty. And we have Spencer and Gillen, Dixon, Landman, Gregory Bateson, Elwyn, Murray, and Deacon. And then we move on to marriage. We have Kroeber, Grinnell, Fortune, Hose, and then Radcliffe Brown. We have art, thought, and sport by Radin, Hamilton, Bunzel, Mariner, Caitlin Junod, Emmons. A lot of these names. Oh, there's Evans Pritchard. That kind of sounds familiar there. Does that sound familiar? That's part of the Daily Round.
What was the name again?
Evans Pritchard. I feel like you've mentioned that name before, but I could be wrong.
Nope, not in mine.
And then I think there's a lot of different. There's a kind of a who's who of anthropologists through here, and it's kind of intended to get students interested.
And we really need to start going through and mapping all of the major anthropologists because we can really track, at least on one level, the spread of the intelligence community through the anthropologists. So what we need to be the anthropologist's anthropologist.
Yeah,
right?
I really enjoyed studying it when I was in college. And now that I'm seeing this new angle on it, I'm really excited to kind of go into these people that influenced me in my earlier years. I think this book is a key lead. Margaret Mead also has another piece in here on immortality as well.
Right.
I think this is kind of a who's who right here, persons of interest, because why would Margaret Mead, who we know is dirty, assemble an anthology unless you wanted to influence people on every single angle? So...
And of course, as an anthropologist, she is going to have the data on what specific areas they want to target to push the society or culture in that direction.
Exactly. This is 1954. That's key.
So they put together a group a cell. They put together a cell to preach a single idea, and the public thinks it's a single truth. And then you've got Mead and Bateson and all of these guys behind it. I mean, they're doing this stuff everywhere. So, I did send Fomenko an email. I haven't heard back from him. He may not speak English, but have you tried Gary Kasparov? He might be even harder to get, but at least he speaks English. I have not tried to send him on. No.
Because he's tied with Fomenko quite a bit. I think he wrote some introductions to some of his work as well. He's on the line of new chronology, but he doesn't say that he believes it. He just thinks it's something worthy of studying.
Well, when you look at these cells, which obviously go all the way back into ancient history, it's like the McClurdy report or I forget the website's name. They have several articles going back on the faking of history, and it's like, yeah, every time you go to one of these ancient documents, the original was lost, but this copy was found in the 14th or 15th century. And it's not just once or twice, it's like all of them, this one was found in 1605 in somebody's attic, and it just mysteriously showed up, and the guy was a Mason, and he immediately turned it over to the group,
Oh man, but
it's like ad infinitum with this stuff. And then when you consider Fomenko's work, and he's a pretty famous mathematician at Moscow University, and he's a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences. He's an astronomer, etc. And then he goes through and he shows that, using astronomy and math, and he created this whole algorithm to, show spikes in history as the same event. And then he lines up all these things. He's discovers, it appears that they lied about history by about 1,060 some years. So in other words, they added an extra 60 years. So let's say in the 1500s, the Catholic Church needed to cover up some lie that they made up. So they would write a document and then age it back into history to, fill in certain gaps of their narrative. But they would do this constantly. They had cells of academics doing this. And then when the Anglican Church broke off under King Henry VIII, they start, I believe, as far as I can tell, which is, again, in the 1500s, they start doing the same thing, and then manufacturing a British history as well, and then all of this stuff flows out from there. So you have, the creating of all of this. So they destroy all of the ancient stuff, they rewrite it in the 15th through 16th, 17th centuries, seed it back into history with this whole, it's like George Orwell and the damn memory hole, And but they didn't need computers to do this. They just needed public book burnings, right? And they would gather up all the books in a town, burn everything. And the public would think, we need, so they were sequestering all the ancient knowledge. They'd burn it and then re-release, a new history back out into public. So I think, it appears that Fomenko accidentally, possibly stumbled on something really, really huge.
It seems that way. I actually have his first book. I've been meaning to
I
read
do
it.
too. I've had his first book for over a decade, actually.
Me too. I got it like my sophomore or junior year of college, and I was like, I'm going to go and take my spare time and check all these sources and go through it. And
well, and here we are, and it kept leading up to it, and it was like 2 weeks ago. I get a Skype late at night from Steve Outram, and he says, "Dude, I'm researching this guy and Anatoly Fomenko," and I'm like, "Yeah, man, I know. We all came at it at the same time." And I'm like, "I've had his book sitting here for a decade. I couldn't figure out how it all fit in." And then all of a sudden it hit me, and he's like, "Yeah, man, it's all fake." Yeah, there you go. Thanks for showing it. I had it sitting here, but I moved it.
Yeah, I need to dig into that. Too bad I don't have any time. There's so much reading to do.
So that's book 1 and 7 of 7, and then he's got like 30 smaller books out, all filling in different parts of the chronology. But it's like even the Great Wall of China appears to have been built in the 1500s, and I started going through and spent several hours one night a couple weeks ago looking at that, and over and over and over. All the citations and references were like 15th century, 1560s, the bricks 1560s. And the show is like, this wall is 2,000 years old. And here we have this citation from this 16th century builder. And then this 16th century, and then they go to, and they show a brick, and they're like, and here the brick is dated, and it shows 1562. And it's like...
Man, you can understand why so many people kind of get turned away from this stuff, because it's so deep.
Yeah.
It's so all encompassing that it can be so overwhelming. And like, if I have any friends watching this right now, like, take it easy, research.
Yeah, well, you have to have the trivium to be able to go through it too, because you have to be able to see the fallacies. You have to know, foundational logic. It really helps to at least, at minimum, go through and study the basics of the trivium method, and then that way you can catch yourself when you want to scream fallacies about it, and stop that, and then just progress through the work. But you have to be willing to question literally everything you think you know. I mean, if you haven't personally verified something, it's probably bullshit.
Exactly, and that's basically the very simplest way you could kind of describe the trivium method, is saying it's just question everything.
It's taking inventory of everything in your mind and checking it. Checking the veracity.
Yeah, just knowing what is. You can't just go off of what some professor tells you and then,
and then you find out all the professors are part of these academic cells, and it's like Daryl Hamamoto, and we're thinking, speaking of him, and I sent him that Charles McLean Andrews citation. He's like, wow, this is huge, I'm taking it to the history department, and then all of a sudden it's like crickets. And he's like, oh, it's not important, it's just so far in the past.
Well, what I've been finding is that the past is very important to understand what is happening now. I mean, all these authors...
He who controls the past controls the present. Something like that famous George Orwell quote, right? And Fabian, right?
Yeah, these publishing companies, these authors, the new kids, the other generations that follow after that, they're influential in kind of shaping what identity I could have. And Jason Horsley, his episodes I found very valuable and kind of relating, because it's that transition from naivete to waking up and kind of seeing the world for what it is. And I remember he was saying that he was trying to find his identity, and he was doing it through movies. He tried to find a film and try to figure out, what identity can I latch onto that makes me my authentic self. But that's not authenticity at all. That's, you're basing yourself off of a fiction. There's nothing authentic about that. That's a representation, and you can only present yourself. You can't represent yourself. There's so much that is necessary. I'm going off on a tangent here. You're gonna have to bring me back, but
it's all right. One thing I keep thinking about is like all the legends and myths. And I spent a lot of time the other day looking at legends and myths. Let me pull that up. And this Nexus. John Dee is really who founded the British, and there's a little picture of Dee there. He's really the first major British spy, and he's run under William Cecil, who is really the first major British spy master. But it was John Dee who created the story of Atlantis to justify, he claimed it was Atlantis so that British could lay claim to the Americas after the Spanish had already gotten here. So it was John Dee was in charge of concocting this false history. And he's also, once they got colonies in the New World, he was also the one who was partially responsible for creating the overpopulation myths to encourage people to settle in the New World from England, etc., so that they could get rid of that. But that's on the Mike McClary website. These articles that they have up on their website go into this. I've tried to reach out to them a couple of times. I've never gotten in touch with them. But, so John Dee was behind all of this. And, obviously the Vatican before him was involved in creating this false history. But what these guys would do, for instance, it was John Dee would have agents say go into a local pub and listen to the local legends, and then what they would do is they would take them back to the wherever, and they would alter the legend ever so slightly and include their own key players. And then they would send these agents back out into the pubs to retell the story. Now, these were what we know as the bards, right? They're telling the king's official version of the history. So here's the bard. Who's the most famous bard that most people know today is Terence McKenna. So Merlin the magician was a bard. And these were the bards. But so they were constantly going back out and rewriting and faking the history. So we see this done through the legends and through the myths, and when I wrote that article, Gordon Wasson, The Man, the Legend, the Myth, at the time I got it somewhat, but I didn't really get how much I got it. They were really using the myth and legend thing, and then when you get that legend means like an agent, like a spy, and then they create these whole things. The bards go sell them back to the pubs, the McKennas go sell them online to all the hippies, etc. Then you get how this gig works, and then you get, like McKenna has, there's a video online of McKenna bragging about John Dee, and I think it might be this one with I don't know. There's a whole video on McKenna that McKenna does on John Dee specifically. I think it's in the database there, but then you can understand why he worships John Dee, right? And then they all worship like John Dee and Emanuel Swedenborg, and then they use the drugs, so then they got to worship Hassani Sabah too, right?
Mm-hmm. There's a quote that just popped in my head when you're talking about that, about infiltrating all the different various means of media to kind of inculcate the masses. And it reminded me of a very famous Fabian by the name of James Ramsey MacDonald. And this is a little bit earlier in his time, but he had an interesting quote about Anglification. He was from Scotland, and he did not like that the Scottish culture was kind of going away. And he said, "The Anglification of Scotland has been proceeding apace to the damage of its education, its music, its literature, its genius, and a generation that is growing up under this influence is uprooted from its past." And that got me really thinking. So I looked up Anglification, and then it's an archaic word. It's now called Anglicanizing, which is generally used to take a foreign word and then make it easier to say and speak in English. So basically,
Sure.
You're changing it. But if we're talking about John Dee, and we're talking about basically the British Empire spreading its wings to India and the United States, specifically where I'm going right now, you can kind of see how they can kind of Anglicanize history. If you look at the Revolutionary War and you look at the attitudes of America leading up to the early 20th century, we did not really get along. At least from the common people did not trust them. But then all of a sudden, the public education system kind of gets around and changes their viewpoint during World War I, when the propaganda departments were targeting the United States to join the war effort. And it was around this time, and these are all Fabian socialists who were working for these departments as well. Not all of them, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of them were. They're Anglicanizing our education system to make us much more favorable to the British Empire, to kind of plant the seeds to support them. So now we are their little war dog. And you can still kind of see that. It extends also to the British mandate in Palestine, because you can kind of see that we're a war dog for other countries as well. That's why we're so infested into the Middle East at this time. It's just like everything kind of keeps going full circle. And this era, this generation is so important to study that I haven't even uncovered everything. There's so much more. It's incestuous too. I mean, it just keeps going back and back and back to the Fabian Society.
Back to the new kids on the block.
Exactly. They're infiltrating everything.
Do you want to wrap it up here, or do you want to go for a little longer? I mean, we're at the top of the hour, or we can continue for a few more minutes if you want.
I could continue. I'm fine with that. If you have something where you want to.
I didn't have anything specific. I don't know if I wanted to flush. There was probably more that I was finding in the. See, I have to go back through my database to remind myself what I was researching the other day. All right, so yeah, fairy tales also come out of this. So then, what John Dee was also in charge of, and this ties directly into your work, was that John Dee was in charge of creating the stories that would promote the legitimacy of the British crown. And so, so then we have the Arthurian legends and the Grimm fairy tales, the princess always coming, or the prince coming to save the princess, all of the, the glorious princess, the glorious prince, all of these stories, Hans Christian Andersen, etc., that promote this royal blood leader idea. And we see that throughout. And then, and so this was part of the intelligence agenda around John Dee. So, so we can see the fairy tales created around that. And then, ciphers. So they would encode messages and stories into a fairy tale or a legend or myth or whatever, and there would be a code to it to uncode it for for their other agents, and this goes into fiction writing and all these fiction authors that we've been finding, like J.R. Tolkien and these guys that, again, they create the image of the the glorious king and queen and et cetera, C.S. Lewis, et cetera. It's this same idea of using, of promoting the intelligence community's agenda behind the scenes. And then when we look at Gollancz and the stuff that these guys were selling, and I'm looking at my database rather than yours, but here, let's pull yours up. If we look at your database, we see all of these different things that he's then in control of, and we can basically see that this is a direct continuation under Gollancz, essentially, of, Gollancz would be like a 20th century John Dee, if that makes sense.
He is a bon vivant with mystical longings, according to the Encyclopedia Judaica. So, I mean, he liked to live lavishly, and he had mystical longings. I mean, you could probably go into mysticism forever and how damaging that can be.
Right, and then so, and exactly, and you just gave me an idea. So in my database, we have, and what do I always say? Mysticism is the tool of tyrants, right? So
Mr. Victor Gollancz right here.
Wait, so shouldn't mysticism be tied with myth, legend, fairy tales, etc.? I mean, isn't that part of the same? It's mysticism, magic, all of that stuff. It should all tie together, right? So I just realized. Thanks for reminding me of that.
It's just like you just said math. You just said magic, and it just popped in my head. Walt Disney's Donald Duck and Math the Magic Land. Do you remember that? Well,
yeah, of course I remember that. I mean, that totally lays out, the whole sacred geometry. Of course, that's been scrubbed from YouTube. But
has it really?
Oh yeah. So let's see. I think I used to have it in here.
That's probably because of the whole. I mean, we know what Disney's like.
All right.
They're gonna hold every copy. Is that Disneyland owns that now? That could be a lot about that.
Anyway, what we're seeing now is this pattern of recreating history, of telling us what to think, which direction to go, creating the narrative to lead us along, like the transhumanist narrative right now, right? And then creating the false history or false narrative behind us. So, once you see it, you can see how these cells are operating everywhere. Now, how do we, undo the cells other than, providing people the trivia method and, just outright mocking them? How do we get it to a point where people recognize that this history has been faked in this manner across the board through these, legends and myths and everything else?
It's almost like you have to create a new myth. It's just kind of sad.
Well, it's like it's the new unmyth, though.
Yeah,
You know,
you got to unmyth
it's
it.
it's just you have to get it to a point where the public, as a general rule, knows how to spot the sophistry, and get it to a point where as soon as it's put out, it just gets mocked and ridiculed.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this because we're trying to find a way to package this all into something that could be easily disseminated to a mass of individuals who have their own varying intellects and their own abilities to comprehend. But then we're also thinking of this, like, how can we standardize it? But if we're trying to standardize something, you're also kind of thinking like these psychopathic socialists who think that they can basically decide how people should live their lives. That's very pathological. So it's trying to find a way of presenting truth in such a manner that it can be distilled to everybody, but on varying layers. So how would you even describe it? So you have high complexity and low complexity. And then I could be going into very, very analytical and theoretical stuff here. But you basically have to kind of key your arguments to varying levels of IQ. It almost seems like you have to have a very simplified version, the academic high school version, the scholarly college version, and then also like the Plymouth businessman version. I'm kind of talking out of my mind right now.
Well, anyway, that's probably a good place to wrap it up. And
yeah, I think we kind of got everything we can get for the day.
Yeah, so hopefully people are getting their minds around how they've controlled the publishing company and create social movements, and how it's social engineering, and how they, I hope that we're beginning to give the idea of a new chronology, whether Fomenko's or someone else's, legitimacy, because of how we're seeing these cells operate across the board. And then we really have to question things. I mean, it gets pretty bad when you can walk into a Barnes and Noble and go agent, 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 agent.
Yeah, you can start calling up the publications, the publishing companies,
the publishing companies, and exactly.
And like the developments I'm finding right now, I'm so overwhelmed by the research that this isn't everything. I haven't vocalized everything that's found in this brain database. There's so much more to talk about. There's so much more to kind of show that Fabians infiltrate. I mean, they're just everywhere. And they started the Communist Party in Britain. They started the Communist Party in Australia, and they're probably responsible for starting the Communist parties in China. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And they started the Labor Party.
And just think, okay, so the Bolshevik Jews murder, 60, 70 million people in Russia. How many did the Maoists murder in China? Then you think of Cambodia. Then you think of Chile and Peru and, all of these places. And then, and it's just like, holy shit,
all that potential.
All of those lives destroyed, and then now they're doing this tiptoe communism crap. Now they're constantly trying to rewrite it. They dress it in love, dress it as feminism, dress it as veganism, dress it as all of these different things to get people to.
Fabian.
Yeah, and it's all Fabian. It all goes back to the
same. Or
same
the Church
core.
of the New Life, which started the Fabian Society.
Interesting.
Which valued pacifism and vegetarianism and simple living, which is very familiar to what's going on right now.
See, what they did was they saw what Trotsky and Stalin and Lenin did in Russia, and they were just appalled. Okay, yeah, we needed to kill all of these people off, but how can we do a soft kill? So then Huxley creates the birth control pill. You create all of this different mind control. You get people to stop reproducing, stop creating families. They break apart the backbone of society, being the family, get everybody reliant upon the state, and they can control everything and dictate everything in that direction. But they realized that how it was done in the Soviet Union was so appalling, so the Fabians came along, hence the wolf in sheep's clothing. And exactly. And so using that idea. They're able to dress it up in love in the sheep, in the lamb, and then, lead the lamb to slaughter, essentially. And yeah, I mean, it's all dressed up in love, and that's the very damn symbol of the Fabians. So there you have it.
That I was talking to a friend through text message the other day, and I was talking about the Fabian Society and how they're wolves in sheep's clothing. But then I also said they're wolves in sheep's hide, or they hide in the sheep's. They hide and hide. They just kind of found a double entendre there within the hide. So
right.
It's like almost like you wear this to hide yourself as something else. It's almost
interesting
use of that word right there. I haven't looked it up etymologically to verify it, but it's just something about that where you hide inside of a hide. You wear that, and I'm thinking about Buffalo Bill from the Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Ed Gein and the Fabian Society.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should probably wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Jacob. This is great information, and see everybody next week. And talk to you soon, Jacob. Keep doing the research. If you come across any more major discoveries on this line, we'll have you back again.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome so much. Take care. Okay. Take care, everyone. Good night.
All right, have a good night.
Bye.